Hello. Hello, coders. Apologies for that. I didn't turn the right things on at the right times. Ah, dear. Deary dear. Yes, the levels are going up and down. That's great. Excellent. Hello, coders. I hope you're all well. Today we're going to be going on even further with the bugs that we created yesterday. We're going to fix them, and I want to talk about some other areas, some other aspects of refactoring, because I was up early this morning. I was thinking about planning how we can refactor the repositories a little bit easier. Before I start, though, I just want to thank Bebo Pirates for following. Thank you very much. I hope you're doing super well. Let's dive into the code. And what I was doing this morning is I was just playing around with Phpstorm. As you can see, we've got a slightly different layout as we have done previously. I'm trying to fill the screen up with as much code as possible. I also started learning some shortcut keys in Phpstorm that I should have known already. So I'm on a Mac. So if I hold down Option and then F12 if I click that to be in focus, then that will bring up the terminal window, and we can see that we've just started a Docker machine. Also, if I did Command and 1, then we can bring up the project as well, which is really handy, and it switches like that. So let's just quickly get into getting this Docker machine running, and then I'll talk about the things that we're going to fix. So I've just started the Docker machine. I need to evaluate the shell. So we're going to just type in eval. That is the wrong project. So this is OOP. Is it OOP or is it? Yeah, OOP PHP. I also use Z shell and Oh My Z shell, which is awesome. So that's how you can see all of the fancy bits and pieces in my terminal. Okay, so we've just evaluated that to shell. So if I did docker ps-a, we should see all of those containers running. And if I ran one of those, if I did a docker exec -it of, I think, is it either the web or it might be the web? Nope, it's probably site. I try and keep these consistent amongst projects, but obviously not. Actually, it's probably docker compose, isn't it? Docker compose exec, we don't need that. Nope. Go back to web. Yeah, okay, so we're in the container now, and the last thing we did was we ran the codeception run, which will run all of the tests, including the unit test, the acceptance test, and the integration tests. So let's have a little run and see what we've broken. There's quite a fair amount of failure here. And we're going to attempt today to fix these 15 errors. A lot of the tests are actually failing because of the same thing, right? So this is to do with the dependency injection, the issues with the dependency injections. So, for example, too few arguments to function abstract repository construct. One is passed, but 2 is needed, is expected. So if we fix one, we should be able to really sort of fix the others too. There are some other ones. If I scrolled up a little bit, there are some other interesting jobbies, I think. Here, for example, find all array should be compatible with find all in the abstract repositories. There are some other bits and pieces. But what I also want to do as well, sorry, I'm trying to make sure I'm on the right keys, is if I opened up the notes file, which is here, I believe, I would like to create a little note to talk about some of the refactoring, okay? Because if I was to go into, where was it? It was it was assessed. So if it was probably one of these things, we're having to instantiate an awful lot of stuff, right? In order to get the customer repository, we need to instantiate a new query builder, we have to instantiate a new connection, and then we have to create a manager. That's an awful lot of work to do, and what I would really like to do is create a note where we can discuss how one would refactor that further. Because I was thinking this morning from the point of view of a controller, and how would we, from a controller's perspective, access a repository. So we wouldn't be doing all of this. We wouldn't be instantiating all of these things. From a controller's perspective, and I guess I could just bung it in here for a minute, we would like to do something very similar, I guess, to Doctrine and how Doctrine is wired up. I haven't delved into the depths of Doctrine, and I don't know how it's wired up, but I do know that from a controller's perspective, you do something a little bit like this. So you do this, and then I think it's like get Doctrine, something like that, and then it's something like get repository. And then you pass in the repository name. So this is, let's say, for example, we've got entities here. It's actually the entity name, not the repository name. So let's say, for example, we want to do let's do a status entity class, and then from here we can do a find all. So that's what you would do from the perspective of a controller. A single line which will get the repository from Doctrine, which is the status repository, and that runs a find all. And that's a single line. That's pretty good. Kind of where we would like to be. This will then do all of that magic in the background and other bits and pieces too. So how does one get to that point of view? Well, this get Doctrine, and I think there's also this container get, or is it just this get? I forget. And then you put in Doctrine as well, because you can pull it out of the service. Let's just put it back to what it was, get Doctrine. So this get repository, I think, is a factory, because you're passing in a parameter, and it's going to make a repository if a repository of that entity hasn't been created before, and then pass it back. And then all repositories would follow some sort of pattern, I guess, like an interface, which has the find all, and then we return it like so. So we obviously don't need to do all the complexity stuff that Doctrine does, because this isn't a overly complicated application. It is so we don't need to do all of those fancy bits and pieces that Doctrine does, I'm sure, but I would like to have some sort of single way of accessing the repositories and also the managers as well from this perspective. So we could call this something like this. Get repository. So this is like this. We don't have Doctrine at all, so we could do this. Repository factory, perhaps, because that, let's call it what it is. And then we could do make, passing in and then, whoops, and then doing our find all. I mean, I'm just playing around, really. I'm just sort of like trying to work out what is best. Essentially, we want to basically cover this up, make another level of abstraction, I guess. So maybe, I mean, we're going to need to deal with the connections and all sorts, so perhaps this shouldn't be a repository factory. Maybe this should be something else. But anyway, I'm going to just grab all of this stuff and I'm going to put this in the notes, because I want to keep, I'm going to put a pin in that, and I want to deal with that later. So I'm just going to write a to-do in here. So this is refactor. how, refactor, and restructure, because there's going to be a bit of restructuring. Well, is it a refactor or is it a restructuring? I think this is actually more to do with a big. This is an abstraction, so it's not actually a refactor. It is a because it's actually quite a big change. I'm just going to do alter how or add abstraction to repositories. So add abstraction to repository, add abstraction layer to repositories, for repositories, to allow controllers to pull out pull out from a factory, and then e.g. boom. So yeah, okay, all right. It's a little bit hit and miss. Let's get this on one line. Yeah, so from within the controller, I want to do something a bit like this or a bit like this. Yeah. Okay, but before we even get to that point, we need to tidy up these tests. If I open up the tests again, just make sure I'm on the right keyboard shortcuts. We need to fix those. That's what we need to deal with first. We need to have some sort of stability, some benchmarking before we can actually do this. Okay, so right. Let's just, I guess we just tackle them from the bottom up, I suppose. So DB status entity test, find all statuses. This is broken on the on here. So let me just grab that. I'm going to just put in test find all. This is that's a shame, isn't it? Test find all statuses. So you can't see this, unfortunately, but I'm using the command line here. So that was that. DB status entity test. DB status entity test. DB entity status test. Okay, cool. And I'm guessing it's up here. We need to put in the builder. So we do need to do something like builder is equal to new builder, and then we pass in the builder into here. So it's not great. All right, we're gonna have to put in some messy code in order to get this to work. But I think we should do this to have this sort of level of stability. Yesterday what I did is I tidied up the builder so we didn't have to inject anything into the builder. All right, so expected query builder, but got app-db builder. Really? Let's tidy that up too. Query builder. Oh. Okay. Query builder. Oh yeah. I see what I'm doing wrong here. Oh dear, this is gonna be tough. So this is going to look really horrible, but it's going to be horrible because we haven't done what I've mentioned, the refactoring. Whoops. And that is Query Builder. I think that is kind of like the similar thing that we need to do across the board. Let me just run those tests and see if we actually get anything. We're looking to beat 15. That's the number, 15 to beat. So if we've done 14, that's great. Okay, no, we've actually brought it down to 12, which is even better. Okay, so the next one is the DB invoice item. So I'm just going to load that up. DB invoice item entity tests. DB invoice item entity test, and let's see, it is this manager stuff. So yeah, I mean, one could argue that we should just, you know, I'm having to do a lot of copying and pasting, which just smells of bad code. And why is there that should be invoice item manager, and this should be and then there's a whole new thing up here which we need to copy to. I mean, this is just not nice. Expected and got status. Oh. Invoice item repository, that's what we're looking for. Of course you're going to do that. Okay, and then this is obviously the invoice manager, so this needs to be invoice repository. And I need to put this actually is a class invoice. And this here, that's fine. Yep. All right. Okay. It's just going to be like this, isn't it? To be honest. So 12 to beat. We've got it down to 9. And the next one here is slightly different. It's saying that invoice item repository find all should be compatible with the find all of all of this stuff. This is because yesterday I started playing around with what did I try and play around with? It's the abstract class for the actual just trying to think, what did I do yesterday? It's this needs to be the same, and I think I changed it to be I think I changed the customer, did I not? Find one, save. Yeah, because on abstract I put in here. There we go. Yeah. So I think now what I need to do is in the invoice item repository, I need to remove. We should have a find all. There we go. We should remove all of this. Let's just make a little bit of room for ourselves. A mo. Oops, sorry, that's the wrong key. That's that. No. I've gone and forgotten the shortcut keys already. Nope, certainly not that. No, let's just get rid of it. Go on, off you go. Okay, so yeah, I need to remove this because this is now in upper level, the find all, and I do need to copy that. So I need to remove all of this. And I also need to fix that issue. What's going on here? Unexpected. Oh yeah, that's just me. And in Invoice Item Manager, we're running a find all. This needs to be the table name, and the table name here is invoice item. This returns some rows, and I need to put that in like so, and obviously have results like that. Something like that. And I think I'm going to need to do like the same thing for the other bits and pieces too. So let's just open up the terminal, run the code. 9 is to beat. So let's see if we can do that. Yep, we're now down to 8. So I think the next one is very similar. Yeah, it's invoice. We're talking about the invoice find all. So let's just dive into the invoice. There we go. See, it was working. So the invoice is slightly similar, right? So we have the find all here. We need to copy all of that, and we need to go into the invoice manager, which is up here, and we need to remove this. No, we don't. No. We don't need to remove that. We need to equal that to be rows. And we need to paste that into here, like so. We also need to pass in a table name, which is invoice. But I think if I remember rightly, in the invoice item manager, it is just this repository find all. Yeah. So if we go back to the invoice manager here, that's fine. But the find all we remove. There we go. That's what I'm trying to. Now we remove this because the parent class, the abstract repository, has the find all mechanism in it, which means that this is now available to all classes, which is the beauty of having this level of abstraction, this level of extension. So I'm going to be doing a similar thing for find one as well, and the other bits and pieces too. But we'll get to those when we get to those. But first of all, let's just go into the code again. Not the code, sorry, the terminal. We've got 8 to beat this time. And one thing I would definitely stress is I wouldn't be doing this unless I had the tests. I wouldn't even consider breaking things like this unless I have the test, because I know the test pass. I know the tests give me a sort of a level of confidence. So I wouldn't even be considering any of this refactoring malarkey unless I had those in play. So too few arguments to function. So this is very similar to the other one. This is the same one. What am I doing? Something has gone a bit wrong here. I haven't done what I should have done. This is again DB invoice entity test. So that sucks. I thought that would have fixed it. Invoice repository. Invoice manager. Passing in the find all. Oh, it's it's missing the return statement, isn't it? Moron. So this will return results, and we also need to define results up here as an empty array. All right. After that little hiccup, let's run the tests again. So 8 is to beat. Now these tests, by the way, they are actually touching the database and they are actually inserting things and deleting things, but after every test we clear down the database and start afresh. We're actually using a completely different Docker container to do those tests in. So that's cool. The same issue. What's going on here? This is the constructor. This is a constructor. So this is actually failing on the test. So let me just load up the test a minute. So it is db invoice entity test, and let's just take down the terminal here. So I'm looking for that command. There we go. db invoice entity test. Is it breaking because of the way the managers are no. Huh. I'm really confused. I'm super confused. I'll tell you what I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to bring this window down a bit just so I can have two screens just to see. So this is too few arguments to function app repository construct, one passed and exactly 2 is expected. It doesn't tell me what is expected. So this is app repository abstract construct in var db invoice entity test. Well, for a start, we're in the wrong class. For a start, we need to be in invoice. Let's go down to the class, to the tests here. They are here. And we go take a look at that yellow dot here. There we go. That's the problem. Yeah, so it's very similar to this, which is again exceptionally annoying. So this needs to be invoice repository, and we're just going to tidy up the bits and pieces. Okay, let's see if we can run those tests. We've got 8 to beat. And we're now down to 5. That's really good. That's taken off quite a bit. So next thing we've got here is, again, argument 1 passed to the constructor on db status entity sest. db status entity sest. So we're now moving into acceptance tests. And we can see on the yellow bits here where they're fouling up. Okay, all right. It's a bit annoying. Do I still have that in my clipboard? No, I don't. That's annoying. Run those. 5 is to beat. So we can now see a lot of ticks, which is good. Always good. So we have 4 to beat now. And this one is the too few arguments to db status entity sest. This is another one on line 53. So you can see this one here. Oh, actually, hang on. What's going on there? Required query builder. Okay, have I... This is because I didn't put these in any sort of form of method. Let's do that just to tidy this up a little bit. Let's do that. Let's do a. Is it a repository that we're after? No, we're after a manager. So let's do public function get manager. Pass that in, and the manager as well is this one. And we're returning the manager. Okay, so we can replace all of this now to be this get manager, and we can remove all of that. I mean, we still obviously need to tidy up how the manager is being created, but you know, when we do these refactorings, we need to do them small chunks at a time. Let's just get rid of that. Okay, so what's the beat here? Force to beat. So let's just run that and see. We have 3 to beat now, which is good. So we are slowly getting down. So find all on the status repository. This is insert with status test. This is invoice db invoice entity sest. So it's a different thing. db invoice entity sest. db invoice entity sest. Here we go. And it is something to do with the find all. And we can actually see, I don't know if you can see because of the things are in the way, but on the screen, but you can actually, on here, I can see, I don't know if I can hover up, the issues. It's very similar as before. We need to pass in the manager, or we actually have to create a manager. So I'm just going to bung this at the top here. This is obviously the invoice manager. This is obviously the invoice repository. And we'll change that up to be the return of you. Let's just tidy up the class. All right. Oh, we already had a get manager, but we weren't using it. Fair enough. So this and this is returning. This is a status manager, so it's not actually the manager that we were just playing with. We need another one. So this is get invoice manager. And this one is going to be get status manager. So let's copy that and put that in here. This is going to be status. This is going to be status repository. Now this, I mean, I've just copied these two methods. There's a lot in here. There's a lot of duplication, so that we will focus on that at some point. Okay, so I've broken an awful lot of stuff. Yeah, because I've now called get. This should be get manager. Let's do a control C to copy that. Let's do a control R, command R to do change that to be invoice manager. Let's replace all of them. Awesome. So that sorts that out. But here we still need to deal with the status manager. So down here, I'm just going to do this get in status manager and then save. Then we can remove all of that out. Awesome. Okay, so what's the beat? 3 is the beat. So let's run those tests again. One is to beat. Wonderful. We've now got it down to our final one. So what's going on here? Declaration of status repository find all should be compatible with app repository with a find all with a table name. Okay, I get what's going on here. So let's just go into the status repository. The issue with this is that we have the find all like that, but we need to remove this like we've done before. So we need to copy this. Oops, copy all of that. Delete all of this because this is not being used anymore. This is now at the top. And then we need to go into the manager. So let's open up the manager, which is up here. Manager, invoice manager. No, sorry, status manager. Beg your pardon. This is what we want to alter. So let's put that in there. Let's change this to be the table name, which is, are we working on status? Yes, so status. We also need to pass back some results. So let's do results is equal to this. That becomes rows, that return function. So we do rows is equal to that, like so. Okay, let's run this and hopefully all the tests would have been fixed. Excellent. So we now have a stable in the eyes of Codeception, a stable well, I shouldn't say Codeception, in the eyes of our tests, everything is passing. That's what I was trying to say. Now there is an awful lot of things that we need to do in order to tidy this up. There's loads. So if I was to take a look at these just the tests, for instance, that needs to be tidied up completely. You know, we're doing exactly the same thing here. All we're doing is we're changing the class name. So invoice item repository, invoice item manager. Everything else is the same. So it's daft. And this is the point. This is part of the point that I wanted to discuss. About the next level of refactoring. If I went into the notes here, we mentioned right at the start of this stream that we want to add an abstraction layer for repositories to allow the controllers, to pull out repositories from a factory. I also want to do the same thing for managers as well. After looking at that code, so I'm just going to put in another to do here. So this is add. It's much the same abstraction layer for managers to allow controllers to pull out managers from a factory. The idea being is that what I would like to do is I would like to do something like this. Get manager. You pass in the manager name. So let's say, for example, this was status manager, or just passing in status, right? And then we can do find all. All right, or we could do save. Because it's the managers that return the entities, not the repositories, which is a bit weird. Maybe I need to adjust my thinking on that. But the idea here is that we are. Let's just put that in for argument's sake. So really looking at this could also be very similar to up here where we've got this get repository. And this is find all. The thing is, though, this needs to be aware of what it is that we're getting. So, and we're going to need to make connections and all sorts of other bits and pieces. So maybe we do this get DB, get repository. With Doctrine, it's get Doctrine, right? If you're a Symfony dev, then you'll recognize this kind of mechanism. We obviously we're not using any framework here. We're making one up. So maybe we do it like that. So get DB, get repository, the entity that we want to get the repository for. So I'm going to need some sort of mapping. And then much like this, so this get DB, get manager, say, and then get the manager, and then save it. Other things that I've done in the past is actually create a class which holds all of these these things. So, for example, in the past, I've done things like the controller would have this sort of repo loader, right? So this is going to load, or repository loader. This repository and then we do get status. Find all, just to dress it up. So we inject a repository loader into our controllers, which handles all of this stuff, and has a method which is a facade, which just pulls this out. This means that this becomes a little bit more easier to read, and also easier for us to for our Phpstorm and the IDEs to actually read, because then what we can do is we can get status will return this, and this returns the actual status entity. What we're doing here is a very dynamic way of actually pulling something out of well, I wouldn't say a container, but we're basically using a factory mechanism here to pull out a status. But this could be invoice, right? So there isn't any way for this return to be sort of dynamic, if that makes sense. Static, in the sense that there's no way of knowing that this is actually going to return an invoice repository or a status repository. Now we can get away with that if the repositories all conform to an interface, so we can just return an interface. Maybe that's the way to go. Same with the managers. Maybe if the managers all conform to an interface, we could just do that. Yeah. So there's some ideas to play with, and I guess what I'm going to do now is see if I can actually quickly write something up. Although we don't have a lot of time left in the stream, we've got probably about 20 minutes or so. But we'll see. We'll play. And we'll see. The best thing here is all the tests are passing. But really what I want to do is these things, I want to replace these things with these things. That's essentially where I want to get to, because these things, this is going to be used by the controller. It's a single line. It does a lot. I mean, here you would pass in the status that you've just that you would like to save. Yeah. All right. So how do I go about this? Well, I'm not entirely sure. I'm making this up on the spot, really. If we go back to the beginning where we've got the query builders, where we can do the selecting and all of this stuff, I think this is okay. We do have builders for collections. I probably should change the name of this to be collections, or change collections to be something else. These are mechanisms to pull out various, or construct various portions of the query. So actually they're query parts rather than a builder. I mean, that's extremely sort of unknown and generic term, builder. So we should at some point change the name of that. Also with connection, we want some mechanism of pulling in the connections. I think the way to start is, if I go back to the notes, is just take a look, because this is where we want to end up with. All right, so the first one is we have this get database. This is going to have to come out of some thing, get DB, and then we have get manager. So I'm guessing that this is going to be some sort of method on the controller, and the controller is going to pull out the database. Well, I guess in terms of Doctrine's way, this is the entity manager, or the object service manager, or whatever it's called. So we need something like that, and then we need something like this, or something like that, and something like this. Yeah, so we need a repository and we need a manager factory. That's probably the first places to start. So I'm going to create a new class here. This is just completely and utterly, like, I'm just literally making this up on the spot. All right, this is, we're not I'm going to call this a little bit more better. It's a repository factory, because I haven't really given this a lot of thought, apart from, I woke up this morning and I had an idea. This is as far as I've got. Repository. So we're going to do a class. This isn't spelt right, is it? Repository factory. Okay. And we're going to have a method in here. We're going to call this get. This is public method. We're going to have make, okay? And this is going to take a class name, which is a string. We're also going to have an array of known repositories, so we're just going to put okay. If key exists, class name. So this is just pseudocode. This isn't this isn't the final product. I'm just trying to get stuff out of my head. So this is an array of repositories. We're going to make a repository and we're going to return a repository. So let's do If key exists, then it's return this repository's class name. Whoopsie. Like so. This is going to return a interface of repositories. I haven't actually created that yet. I don't think. Have I not created that yet? Abstract? No, I haven't. Yeah, so if it exists, then we return it. If it doesn't, then what we do is we make it. So when we make it, we need to do all the gubbins. So we need to do something like whoops is equal to new, class name, really, but it's a little bit more than that, isn't it? Because the class name has the connection and the query builder and all of that other jazz. So we need to have a public. Let's just grab my tea before it goes freezing cold. Let's just remove the. There we go. Make some room. Make a little bit of room. Yeah, so I'm going to need a public function in here, and I'm going to need it's going to be a constructor. This is going to have the connection, and I think we also need, if I go back down to the abstract repo, we need connection and we need query builder. In fact, I'm just going to copy that, to be honest. That's what we need in here, because this is what we need. We need to do this class name, and we need to do this connection. Whoops. This query builder. That's what we need to do. And then we return this. So our little factory here is creating, whoops, a repository. It's saving it to the class name. It just means that we don't have to instantiate it each time. If that's the case, yeah. All right, let me just take a look. So query builder extends query create, and query create requires the builder. Yikes. Yikes. So we need so this is the dirty part. We're injecting it in here, the query builder, but the query builder itself needs to have a dependency. So I'm a little bit confused. Well, I'm a little bit torn as to what to do here, because we've got the abstract repository requires a connection and a query builder. The query builder itself requires a builder. It always comes back to this. Always comes back to this. I mean, I could get around this. I could get around this by instantiating the query builder. But I don't want to do that, because we should only really be instantiating it once and passing it through. Okay. Okay, so let's think. What is the... Oh. Whoops. Something's gone a bit wrong here. That should be builder. So, okay. What about query create? Why don't we extend? No. Nope. 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 Okay, okay. I guess what we could do is... Yeah, setters aren't going to work, are they? I don't want to use a trait. Certainly do not want to be using traits for this. That's just an excuse. So let's think about how this is going to be instantiated. So let's do so I'm just spitballing here. So repository is equal to repository factory is equal to new repository factory, right? We need a connection, so we're going to do connection is equal to new connection. So that goes in. And all of this is fine. I mean, I'm happy to inject these as well as the query builder. And then what I would like to do is say, let's say status repo is equal to repository factory make status entity class, and then this will have some sort of find all on it. So that's where I want to end up, right? But the difficulty is this query builder, because the query builder itself has a dependency, and I'm not sure how to cope with that. I should assume that everything that gets injected into this constructor has already been, it is kosher. Yeah. Okay, so really to get around this, we need to do builder is equal to new so wherever this is being called from, that needs to happen. And I'm just not happy about this. Okay, I'm going to put a pin in that, because that's obviously, I obviously can't solve that in the next couple of minutes. All right. The next step is to come up with some sort of interface that this conforms with. So let's see if we had a repository interface. So interface. Let's just get rid of. Let's just get rid of that for a minute. And we have things like find all, find one and others. So find all is going to return an array. Find one is going to probably return a standard object, maybe. And let's say, for example, the factory returns a repository interface. Did I put a namespace? Have I put namespaces in any of these? No, I haven't. Ugh. Right. Yeah, okay, so we have the factory here, and we're returning a repository interface now, which then has the find all on it. So that there we go. The other issue here, of course, is that we're passing in an entity, not an actual repository. So we need some way of mapping an entity to its repository. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure how one would get around that. We would need some sort of map, right? That would map an entity to its repository. And I think there's the meta map in Doctrine that does this. I mean, I know with the annotations you can say that this entity has this repository, and that's how it works. But we obviously don't have any of that, so we need some form of way of dealing with this. Because we're passing in the entity class name, and let's just make that a little bit clearer. So this is entity name, entity class name. Which means that we want to, this should be repo this still needs to be entity class name, because we're still going to, you only have one repository to one entity. But we need to somehow map them, and I'm not entirely sure how to go about that. I mean, we could create a key value pair that says something like, map is equal to da, and we could have something like the key being status class is equal to status repository, right? And so we know that this is the class for the repository for the status, and so on and so forth. I guess we could do something like that. So I guess what this would end up with is like so first of all we do if key exists, entity class name to map. Then we do repo is equal to map entity class name. I mean, that's not nice. and then we create, and then obviously we would have something like, you know, invoice entity to class to invoice repository, and so on and so on and so on. I guess we could do that. I mean, I know Doctrine does all of this in the background automatically. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Yeah. And obviously we need to check whether or not the key doesn't exist, and if it doesn't exist, we need to throw an exception. Yeah, and we should also throw an exception if the repository that we actually pull out doesn't have that particular interface. But yeah, there's a lot to do. There is a lot to do. I am going to call this a day, though, because I've got to get on and do other things for other people today. So, you know, as a freelance developer, I do need to get on, as it's 8:36 now. So I think what I'm going to do is come back to this, I think, next week on the next stream around this project. I'm hoping, though, to be on live streaming on Sunday at 14:30. I say I'm hoping. It really depends on how much I can get done over Saturday and Sunday morning. But do follow me on Twitter at howtocodewell just to find that out, because I'll announce it then. Yeah, on the Sunday stream, though, we won't be doing this. We'll be doing a completely different project, that another side project of mine. I think we're probably going to be doing a bit of Symfony, which is pretty cool. Symfony 4. On tomorrow, I shan't be streaming because I'm travelling tomorrow to Cardiff because I'm giving a talk at PHP South Wales titled "Put Your Docker Image on a Diet." And if you want to see me practice that, then check out the streams beforehand, the Sunday streams before this, because I've practiced it a couple of times here on Twitch. Yeah, so I'm giving that on Thursday, so tomorrow. And yeah, if you're there, I'll see you there. If not, then do check out the check out the rehearsals that I've done previously. But for now, I'm going to call it a day, or call it a morning, and crack on with some other bits and pieces. So thank you ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.